Michael Mayle, founding partner for the Advisory Board for the Arts. And today I'm joined by my colleague Karen Freeman, our Executive Director of Research. We're glad you've joined us for today's webinar on strategic partnerships in the arts. For those of you who are not familiar with us, the Advisory Board for the Arts is a research-based membership organization dedicated to the pursuit of best practices and ideas to address the challenges that arts organizations face worldwide. You can learn more about us and see our research on our website. On the call today, there are a wide variety of members and guests from around the world, and we are grateful to all of you for spending time with us. So a bit of housekeeping before we begin. First, if you have a question at any time during the conversation, please type it into the chat box. You may send it to the entire group or send it to Karen privately. Karen will keep track of all of those questions, and later in our discussions, we'll ask our guests to respond to as many of them as possible. As you can see, here are all the people who are joining us today. We have a great representation from the city of Chicago, not surprisingly, from both of our guest organizations, the Lyric Opera of Chicago and the Joffrey Ballet. So at this point, I think all of you are proficient Zoom users, but to make our call feel a little bit more like a community, please take a moment and enter your name and organization into the chat box so others can see who has joined us. I think you'll see some familiar names and be pleasantly surprised by the wide variety of organizations from around the world who are here today. In addition, so as to better hear our guests, we have muted everyone's audio. Again, if you do have a question or a comment at any time for us or for the guests, please type it into the chat box. So let's get started. The topic for our conversation today is strategic partnerships in Chicago, a discussion with the Lyric Opera of Chicago and the Joffrey Ballet. Partnerships and collaborations between artists are at the core of what we do as arts organizations, but far rarer are partnerships on the administrative side of our business. Today we meet two organizations where an artistic partnership led to something much greater. Lyric Opera of Chicago and the Joffrey are two of the leading performing arts organizations in Chicago, if not the country, or if not the world for that matter. Over the past few years, they have developed an extraordinarily deep relationship between the two organizations, of which sharing space in the Lyric Opera House is just one component. Together, they have created a partnership which benefits both organizations. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by the leaders of the Lyric and Joffrey to talk about their partnership, how both organizations have benefited, and the hurdles they had to overcome and lessons learned. But first, let's begin with a clip from a production that first brought the two groups together, a lyric opera production of Gluck's Orfeo e Euridice, featuring dancers from the Joffrey Ballet. I hope you enjoyed that taste of what these two extraordinary companies can do together. The good news is, if you'd like to see the whole thing, it will be available free for viewing on PBS Great Performances on Demand from February 19th until March 19th. Again, on Great Performances, PBS On Demand, available free for the entire month. So I hope you'll take an opportunity to enjoy it. So let's meet our guests. In addition to the four who are on today's webinar, we are joined in the audience by the chairman of the board of the Lyric Opera, Sylvia Neal, and Ann Kaplan, the board chair of the Joffrey. both of whom were instrumental in making this partnership happen. So today we are joined by Anthony Freud, General Director, President, and CEO of Lyric Opera of Chicago, Ashley Weir, who is the Artistic Director of the Joffrey Ballet, Greg Cameron, President and CEO of the Joffrey Ballet, and Drew Landmesser, Deputy General Director and COO of the Lyric Opera. Welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining us. So let's begin by talking about what we just saw. How did this artistic partnership come about, and how did it lay the groundwork for the relationship between your two organizations? Anthony, can we start with you?
Sure. Good morning, Michael. Good morning, everybody. Great that you're all able to join us, and many thanks to ABA for organizing this conversation. I must say, with these times being so challenging for all of us, it's great to actually have a discussion about something that I have to say is entirely happy, entirely fortuitous, and incredibly exciting. I first moved to Chicago to join Lyric about 10 years ago. And of course, I was fully aware of the extraordinary infrastructure of great arts and cultural organizations in Chicago. Lyric in its history did not have collaboration as part of its DNA. I'm passionate about collaboration, and I was really keen that we collaborate creatively with as many organizations around the city as possible. Of course, I was familiar with the amazing distinction and history of the Joffrey and Ashley's artistic direction of the Joffrey. And Ashley was one of the first people I was introduced to actually before I moved to Chicago. Before long, we found ourselves in my office dreaming, brainstorming about the idea of Lyric Opera and the Joffrey Ballet working together on an artistic project. I wanted to find an opera in which dance and song are of equal importance. And if you think about it, there are very few in that category. There are plenty of operas involving dance and ballet, but generally dance plays a subsidiary role. One very great exception is Orphée et Eurydice by Gluck, particularly in the 1774 Paris version. And so we discussed the idea of doing that. For decades, I'd been a huge admirer of the legendary work of John Neumeier. And when Ashley told me that he was already in touch with John and that John would be working with the Joffrey, I thought, well, there's the perfect combination. Lyric, Joffrey, Orphée, Eurydice, directed, choreographed, designed by John Neumeier. Ashley and I virtually there and then picked up the phone. We spoke to John. Fast forward a few years to the fall of 2017, and the series of wonderful performances, the trailer of which you've just seen, actually happened. It was a magnificent partnership, a magnificent production, a really great project for us to begin a very wide-ranging collaboration between Lyric and the Joffrey.
And Ashley, what did you think when Anthony approached you with this idea? It's not something you typically do. You're on mute. Ashley, you're on mute. Ashley, you're on mute.
Good morning, Michael. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Anthony and I were having dinner one night, and he asked me what I felt about collaboration between opera and dance. And I'm a huge proponent of it. I think bringing many multidisciplines to the stage is a beautiful thing, as you can see from the wonderful video. So I think that, as Anthony said, we talked about it, and it did seem, I knew the opera of Orphée very, very well. I had seen other versions of it, but I think that we wanted something very, very specific to the Lyric, to the Joffrey, to Chicago. And, you know, John Neumeier, who is, you know, a prodigal son of Chicago, seemed like absolutely the right person to engage. And it's interesting because John had done other versions of Orphée, but I think the version that he created for the Joffrey and the Lyric is absolutely sublimely beautiful. And to have someone who can see the full visual of what that idea looks like in the end. So I think the idea of him choreographing it, directing, lighting, costume was pretty remarkable in any form. And I think the results speak for itself. And I would encourage everyone to see just how cohesive a collaboration can be, because it was, I think, from day one until the opening night, it was a really seamless communication, collaboration between the Lyric, John Newmeyer, and the Joffrey.
Fantastic. So, Drew, from this artistic partnership grew something special. Describe the details of the partnership, the administrative side with the two organizations. What's included? What's not?
Well, I think, first of all, thanks for everybody joining together, and anybody who's worked in a company who shares a building with the ballet company or an opera company understands the relationship. We're just starting it from day one. A lot of us have been, I mean, when I was in Houston, when I was in San Francisco, a lot of us have worked in those situations before where we've had to get along with somebody. The question now is, do we want to get along with somebody? And I think the time was right. The management of Joffrey, the management of Lyric, everything felt sympathetic. It felt like we all had the same kinds of things that held us together. There was an important moment in our time when we had an opportunity, and that's the tricky bit, the schedule. So the schedule was the first thing that we had to have in common, and maybe the most difficult. By far and away, though, the most litigious was the orchestra, because the Joffrey will be using the Lyric Opera Orchestra, and there were no provisions for it in our CBA. So we had to negotiate very carefully with the orchestra to be able to allow for the services at the kind of price point that would be expected by the ballet, and with the flexibility of the ballet to either have a large orchestra or a small orchestra, for some pieces, no orchestra. And the rest is the kind of the typical expectation of what happens when you go to a theater, except it's more than a four-wall rental. It's not just sharing the lights and the sound equipment. It's sharing staff in a kind of a friendly way, but the way that we all do behind the scenes if we come into an opera house or a ballet theater where we have been sharing with the other partners for years.
So, Greg, from Joffrey's perspective, what is included in this partnership for you? Obviously, use of the opera house and the orchestra, but certainly more than that, I think.
Sure, and I might even back up a little bit before Orfeh, but the NFL draft came to Chicago, and as a result of the NFL draft being in Chicago and being at the Auditorium Theater, we needed to find a performance home for our Cinderella performance. And this happened in an unexpected way. I don't need to give you the full backstory, but in Chicago, the Auditorium Theater and the Lyric Opera are really the only two venues that could accommodate the needs that we had on the stage for a large production like Cinderella. And as we realized we needed a venue, we quickly reached out to the Lyric, and they dropped everything to try to figure out a way that they could accommodate this very last minute change for us. The reality was that it wasn't able to happen, and we ultimately shifted the dates of our performances at the Auditorium Theater. But it created an opportunity for not just Ashley and Anthony to have conversations, but for both of our organizations, from the board to the administrative leadership to marketing teams, development teams, to get to know each other. And that really, along with the work that Anthony and Ashley were developing around Orfeh, led us to have a conversation. And I can clearly remember sitting in Anthony's office with Drew and Ashley and myself saying, what might it look like? And to Drew's point, this was about choosing partners. It wasn't about family. We didn't have to do this. We wanted to talk and see what could be possible. And the first meeting, we said, Team Lyric, we are open to this. The only non-negotiable is that we have to be able to do the Nutcracker in December. We can't do the Nutcracker in July, but anything else, we are willing to look at reinventing how we schedule our performances, how we really work together. And in short order, we got a call from the Lyric team and they said, we can make that work. And then the conversation started. And it really was from our perspective about creating the best artistic platform for our company artists and the choreographers that we work with. And I think, I am so fortunate to work with an artistic director, as one would expect, that leads with putting the artist front and center all the time, but also understands the incredible importance of the business side of our operations. And we wanted to create the best opportunity for our artists and of course for our audiences. And that led us to ultimately creating a 7-year license agreement with the Lyric. And, looking back, I think it, continues to reinforce as we moved through or as we continue to move through the pandemic. Back in March, our first decision was we have to keep the company whole, we have to keep them safe and healthy, and we have to look out for their care and feeding. And both the Lyric and the Joffrey lead with mission. And I think when you lead with mission, you can't go wrong. That doesn't mean there weren't moments, where we were negotiating things that, created, wiggles and adjustments for us that, got to a good point. But, I don't want to make it sound like there weren't, peaks and valleys. So I'm sorry, maybe that's a little too much, but trying to create just a little context.
So Drew, let me just go back to you for a moment. It's a 7-year relationship. Clearly, it involves Joffrey taking space in the auditorium, renting the auditorium and the orchestra. What else is included in this relationship? Is there more? You mentioned marketing in passing. What more are the two organizations doing together besides just that space rental?
I think when we first were engaging in this conversation, when we were teasing each other with what might be possible, it was just the rental of the theater. But I think it's been clear as we got to know each other and as we know each other's former home. I know the auditorium well. Rich Regan, one of my colleagues who's now back at the auditorium as the CEO, knew the Joffrey well from his days there. We understood what little benefit we had problems replicating, and what greater benefit we had an opportunity. Entertainment facilities for the patrons, restroom facilities for the patrons. The patron experience is much different at the Lyric. But backstage is where the real difference is for the company, for the dance company, for the opera company. And we have benefits there in terms of rehearsal rooms and just the facilities. We did a big renovation in the 90s. We just did a renovation over this summer to improve the sight lines on the main floor by stretching out the seats, eliminating some seats, and making the sight lines much better. But physically, we have a better rigging system. We have an opera house rigging system with motorized rigging and with huge space backstage. With lighting and sound system. I don't think the Joffrey will probably need to rent anything in that kind of area for a long time, unless it's incredibly specialized. But just finding that we work together as a team well. I think our technical staff is working well with the staff, the production staff at the ballet, and then eventually through Tessitura, our ticketing system is completely shared. We are in some ways one company, and in some ways two very distinct companies.
Great. So Anthony and Ashley, talk, if you will, about the role that your boards played in this relationship and that the artistic leadership played in this relationship. Anthony, you want to start?
I think, as has already been said, the foundation for a relationship of this sort is a combination of opportunity and challenge. And I think both the Joffrey and Lyric had that combination of opportunities and challenges that led to our choosing to develop this relationship. From Lyric's point of view, if we had embarked on this 15 years ago when we were scheduling and selling out 90 performances of opera every season, we wouldn't have had the scheduling flexibility to be able to incorporate even the Nutcracker, let alone the other Joffrey seasons. But in common with performing arts organizations around the country, we have got to a situation now in which we can justify scheduling fewer opera performances. We own our opera house. That's another very important starting point. We're very rare among US opera companies in that we do own our opera house. And that, combined with the scheduling flexibility, created an opportunity in business planning terms, in artistic collaborative terms, and in all the detailed ways that have already been touched upon, to really develop a very comprehensive partnership. This is not a merger, and I think we have to make this absolutely clear. Lyric and the Joffrey are not merging from a corporate structural point of view, but we are embracing each other in a very meaningful way. And in a way, and this now comes to your question, Michael, in a way that was embraced enthusiastically by both our boards. In my experience, boards love collaboration between the companies they support. And in Chicago, in common with many cities around the US, we and the Joffrey have a number of board members in common. Even among those board members whom we don't share, I think there was a really important enthusiasm and conviction that a relationship between Lyric and the Joffrey made so much sense that it was really worth developing and encouraging. As Greg said, of course it's complicated. Of course, the negotiating process, which must have taken the best part of 2 years, I suppose, had moments when there were significant challenges we needed to overcome. But because the intention to form the partnership was built upon that foundation of opportunity and challenge that was really mutual to both companies, there was a determination both within the management of both companies and within the boards of both companies that we reach a successful conclusion. And happily, and this was a happy coincidence, but a coincidence nonetheless, the announcement of the new relationship between the Joffrey and Lyric, in which the Joffrey became the Lyric Opera House's resident ballet company, that announcement was made almost simultaneously with the opening night of Orfeo Eurydice. So the alignment of planets was very significant and very fortuitous.
And Ashley, the Joffrey board felt the same way, it sounds like?
Absolutely. I think Anthony said it best. I think that, there was a synergy. And I think that, when you start getting into the minutiae of what it's really going to take to be collaborative partners and to move the Joffrey from the auditorium to the Lyric, I think that, artistically for me, the Lyric offers us a venue that is second to none. It is technically state of the art. There are many productions that I've wanted to bring to Chicago that I think are absolutely possible, without a doubt now. And I think that kind of explaining all those things to our board, I think that Anthony and Drew looked at the calendar to make it work for the Joffrey, for what our season wanted to be, what our subscribers are used to wanting to see. And so I think that the more information that you give your board, the more on board they are. And that's what really happened. And I think it's kind of wonderful that both on our boards and in our audiences, there is a big crossover. And I think that, the Lyric Opera House is a beautiful, beautiful venue to showcase two great arts organizations. And so everything about it, from front of house to backstage, is really, really something that I think that, now the Joffrey is 25 years in Chicago and definitely the resident company here. It just seems so right that we share this beautiful house with the Lyric Opera.
Great. So Greg, let me ask you, Drew mentioned in his earlier comments the challenges with renegotiating an orchestra contract, with dealing with the challenges of their schedule and trying to make sure that December was free for Nutcracker. What challenges did Joffrey have to overcome? What changes in operations did your organization have to make this work?
And I would invite Ashley to chime in. My colleagues know that I'm the hope and optimism guy. So I would really say, in complete honesty, that there really weren't very many challenges. The Joffrey, and Ashley knows this better than I do since he danced with the company in the 1980s, but for almost 65 years, the Joffrey has been a renter. You know, early on, it was, you know, in and out of a car and in and out of, you know, small venues across the country. When the Joffrey came to Chicago, you know, we settled down and established a relationship with the Auditorium Theater, which really provided an opportunity for the organization to grow artistically under Ashley's leadership, and, you know, and over the past 8+ years, really solidify our financial footings. You know, probably 9-10 years ago, the Lyric wouldn't have wanted to, you know, invite the Joffrey to be a partner because we were dealing with lots of challenges. I think, you know, just, you know, getting our head around the fact that we were going to be moving was exciting and energizing. Indeed, a bit frightening because the team knew how to manage the front of house at the auditorium, and you know, on the artistic side, the stage, et cetera, was a level of comfort. So moving all of us to a place of saying, you know, let's embrace the new. And I think, you know, over the length of our partnership, which will finally be realized in fall of 21, you know, fingers crossed for all of us, all of you on the call, or we know making plans about the return to the stage. But I think that we have led both institutions with a commitment to growth and transformation, and we've done it with a spirit of trust and transparency. And I think, you know, the trust that we have for the Lyric, and the transparency and the way that we share information. We, you know, early on in the pandemic, we're having conversations, you know, every other week. Now we've, you know, continued to meet on a monthly basis and of course exchange information as necessary. We jointly announced the cancellations of our seasons, so we weren't going to be sending mixed messages to our respective audiences, who of course are oftentimes one and the same. We have lots of crossover, not just in board members, but in subscribers and single ticket buyers. So you know, for me, it was energizing, exciting, I think, because it was something that we collectively decided to do. Had our boards come to us and said, you know, Ashley and Greg, you got to go work with the Lyric, it might have felt different. But I do think that you know, David and Zach, who were the board chairs during the negotiations of this, developed both a professional and a personal friendship. And Anne and Sylvia, who are you know, our amazing board chairs now, have known each other through shared work that they do at the Museum of Contemporary Art. And we're really excited to be able to, you know, to share something that I think is so unique to Chicago. You know, Chicago is a collaborative city. We get more done because we work together. And I think it's unique to us. I do think it's important, though, and you know, to mention that the Orfeh partnership also involved Los Angeles, you know, which for us was an added win because we got to take you know, our entire company to LA and not just perform Orfeh for LA audiences, but also perform our Romeo and Juliet, Christophe Pasteur's Romeo and Juliet. So, you know, there's just the expected wins and then the unexpected wins. And I don't know. Can't think of any moment where it was really felt like a big challenge. It just always felt like opportunity with a little bit of fine tuning.
So let me come back to Anthony and Ashley, building on something you just said. I mean, Greg, obviously this relationship began prior to the pandemic, and I'm wondering, Ashley and Anthony, how have you two organizations worked together during the pandemic? And I guess more importantly, once the doors of the Lyric reopen, do you anticipate any changes? And Ashley, you want to start?
Sure. I just want to touch on something Greg said too. I think that trust is a very big issue here. I think it's really important. And I think that having open dialogue, whether they're the successes or the challenges that we face, I think that it's really heartening to know that you have partners in your city, and especially with the Lyric, that we have a partner that we can go and talk to, and we can be vulnerable, and we can work out and talk out the future and what we want to achieve. So, I think that the benefits are huge, and I think that working together through the pandemic, we as we know, every arts organization across the world has been struggling. But I think to know you have a partner down the road that has your back and that you're looking out for them as well, and that we know we're going to get through this. And of course, we're looking forward to the fall when we can be at the Lyric Opera House. So I do. I think that trust and communication are key things.
And Anthony, changes when you think the doors open again? Anything you think will be different?
I think everything will be different in terms of how we have to embrace our new opportunities and our new challenges. The foundation of the relationship between Lyric and the Joffrey, which is encapsulated into our 7-year contract, is absolutely intact. We have, as has already been said, kept in constant touch, being very transparent, very open about our fears, our concerns, and I imagine everyone on this call has spent the last 10 or 11 months having parallel fears and concerns, trying our best to deal with all these unforeseen and unprecedented nightmares being thrown at us. But I have to say, I think the relationship between the Joffrey and Lyric has, if anything, strengthened through this time of great adversity. As Ashley rightly said, a relationship that is worth having has to be based on trust, has to be based on transparency. I actually would go further than that, and I think a relationship can only develop if there is mutual respect and mutual admiration, artistically and professionally and institutionally from day one. That provides the secure foundation from which the inevitable challenges and issues can be then solved effectively. It's already been mentioned that there's overlap between our boards and our audiences. I think numerically, probably there is greater lack of overlap between our audiences. Think of the opportunities there, the thousands and thousands of Joffrey audience members who may never have set foot in the Lyric Opera House or been to an opera before, the thousands of Lyric Opera audiences who will now have within their home an opportunity to enjoy the Joffrey Ballet performances. It seems to me to be a win for the Joffrey, a win for Lyric, and a win for the city of Chicago. If you think of the great opera houses of the world, in so many cases, they are buildings that present to their audiences regular diets of both opera and ballet at world-class levels. Think of London with the Royal Opera and the Royal Ballet, think of Paris, of Vienna, of Milan, etc., etc., etc. Well, I'm incredibly proud and excited that the Lyric Opera House, from the time we're able to reopen this fall, will be presenting regular performances of both great opera and great ballet. And in some ways, the Lyric Opera House will be able rightfully to take its place alongside the great opera houses of the world, simply because of the new partnership between the Joffrey and Lyric. And that has to be a wonderful, exciting opportunity for the city of Chicago.
Well, Anthony, we actually had a question that thankfully you just answered, asking about how the partnership helped with audience development. So thank you for proactively taking that on. Drew, I'd like
Michael, can I just, I'm sorry, it seems like the right time, picking up on the thread that Ashley and Anthony talked about, moving forward, we both are committed to Chicago, as Anthony mentioned, and the Lyric has the Ryan Opera Center, which trains, young opera singers to be on stage. The Joffrey has the Joffrey Academy of Dance, led by our Abbott director, Raymond Rodriguez. And I think as we move forward, there are many opportunities to think about how we can bring young opera singers together with young dancers. We also have a deep commitment to the youth of Chicago through our community engagement programs led by Linda Swayze, and the Lyric has Lyric Unlimited. And I think, again, these will be next steps in how do we work together. And as I, look at Anthony on the Zoom screen, every other Friday, Anthony and I are part of a group in Chicago called Enrich Chicago. And we are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, very specifically making our respective organizations anti-racist. And this work is forever work, but it's work that we're doing at the Joffrey, the Lyric is doing at the Lyric, but we're also reaching out and engaging with cultural partners across the city of Chicago, as well as peers nationally and internationally. And I think that is so important. That's the stuff that you can't put into a license agreement. It goes back to, mutual admiration, trust, transparency, and a real commitment to relevance. So sorry, I just felt like the right time to share some of that.
That's terrific. Thank you very much. That's great. And obviously, as you all have said, the foundation of trust and mutual respect is sort of table stakes. Without that, there is no relationship possible, or the relationship will surely fall apart within days. I'm curious, Drew, in terms of the Lyric, in terms of your new roommate. What were the surprises? Were there any issues that you just didn't anticipate that sort of caught you off guard that you had to deal with? What didn't you expect?
Well, first, I want to give a little context for the 100 people in the room who don't know our cases more specifically. We were supposed to cohabitate this September and all fall long. We're just not doing that quite yet, just in Zoom. So what a lot of our anxieties and our concerns and the things we thought that we'd put the chess pieces in the right place in anticipation of this fall, we're just still holding off on them. I will say that in the early negotiations, I've referenced this before, the schedule is probably the most difficult thing. We looked at a kind of a more European model of having Monday night opera, Tuesday night ballet, Wednesday, Thursday opera, Friday night ballet. That just didn't make sense from a business separation context. It was very difficult to understand how we would charge changeovers and time in the theater, and just where we would live and where we would dress, and how the wardrobe department would respond. And so we soon came to a more familiar, I think, with an American opera house, ballet house, home sharing of, we'll do two operas, the ballet will move in, do a ballet. We'll do two operas, the ballet will move in and do Nutcracker. We'll take an hour or two off around the holiday, and then we'll come back with two operas, ballet, two operas, ballet, musical presented by the opera. And then summer tech, which consumes July and August. So the building was really kind of now scheduled really rather tightly. So the thing that we didn't expect, I think, was understanding that sometimes in the auditorium theater, the old home of the ballet, sometimes they would move in on Wednesday or Thursday the week before, except we still had 4 shows to produce in the opera house in our schedule. So as we started nudging the schedules around and looking at how we could do that's become a challenge, and it's something we're going to be watching really carefully in the first years of the contract. I think COVID has given us a chance to go back and revisit schedules and see if we can have any more liberty in any part of the season going forward. And certainly it's affected, from the Lyrics point of view, having very specific blocks of time that terminate 4 times a year, how we plan what size show to happen when, and definitely around holidays. We have religious holidays that now fall into certain blocks that give us a bit of a surprise sometimes when you look out 3 years and say, oh.
Right.
So in the next 7 years, we'll see how we adapt. It takes an opera calendar stretches, our planning calendar stretches out further into the future than most organizations, and that we have to watch how we're contracting artists and shows in the future, and hopefully we'll be adjusting so that we make this alignment of our two great companies working in one space a better fit.
So
We've already found that not every element of the contract is as we would like it to be. So for example, as Drew said, the contract was based around Lyric rescheduling its opera season to be able to replicate the Joffrey's current periods in the auditorium theatre. We managed that for the reasons that we talked about earlier. But as Drew rightly said, they're very specific periods with very finite beginning and end dates. What now is becoming clear is that those finite beginning and end dates may not actually be as welcome to the Joffrey as first seemed, and something a little more fluid, something a little more flexible, something that was not as rigid may well be worth exploring. So the starting point was the very specific period agreements as per the contract, which we're already beginning now to look at together and see what adjustments can be made to mutual benefit.
I think the key, one of the keys to understand how we might evolve and make the schedule more friendly for both is just getting through one CBA with the orchestra. or even one show with the orchestra will help. But that's the maybe the most inflexible part of how we can manipulate to make this work better.
And Michael, I just want to say also that I think that, at the Joffrey, we have also, been doing a 5-year plan. And I think that being able to share those 5 years and beyond with Drew and Anthony and look at what the schedule looks like and what are we thinking production wise and how do we hang everything in the theater and what makes a good rotation and what makes a really complicated situation. So again, being transparent with what we want to do and is it possible in a specific time frame, we can switch. We have to be fluid.
And I think actually the time we've had from when we inked the agreement, I mean, but Orfei seemed like to the public like the first time we had this great idea, but it was 2 years in the gears before anything came out. Orfei was just a great coincidence maybe, but in the time we've had since when we made the agreement and now we've been able to understand our production and technical people, Michael Smallwood at the lyric side, the Joffrey people work together cooperatively to really understand what production really works great here and will be more problematic if we don't adjust the schedule. So, yeah, and thank you. I mean, it's really cool to have partners like that who you can talk to about, well, this is going to be tough.
It would be even cooler to have partners when we were actually able to be in the office rehearsing.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Just a reminder to everyone in the audience, if you have a question, please put it in the chat box. We'll get to them momentarily. Let me ask the final question, I guess, for all four of you, and really, I think the question a lot of people are asking. You said at the outset this is not a merger, and clearly it is a deep partnership, but not a merger. And yet you're sharing Tessitura systems. Somebody mentioned in passing marketing, perhaps obviously the back of the house is working very tightly together. And perhaps it's entirely premature. We should be asking this in 5 years, but where do you go next? Are you looking for additional ways to work together? What might we look to expect from the two organizations over the course of the next 7 years? Greg, you want to start with that?
Sure, and Michael, I know I jumped the gun a little bit in talking about the Ryan Opera Center and our academy and our respective commitments to community here in Chicago. And I think those are two really key areas where we can do more for Chicago. And I think to Anthony's earlier point, this is about keeping our city strong and vital. In order for us to be strong cultural organizations, our city needs to be a strong city. And I think we bring that to the city, and under Mayor Emanuel and now Mayor Lightfoot, the city understands the value of its cultural assets. So I think it's being sensitive to, what might make sense. I know our Chief Marketing Officer, Brian Smith, is in regular contact with his peers, exploring, the opportunities that exist in growing audience, perhaps in the future, a subscription that might include, 2 operas and 2 ballets, opportunities to do some joint fundraising, around programs that we haven't even, created yet, whether it be artistic or community. I think reaching out to, I know my peers in the dance space across the country, are interested in Chicago, and we know that the opera world looks to the lyrics. So I just see it as sort of limitless potential, and they'll sort of emerge. And I think, to Anthony and Drew's point, once we're actually really on the stage, there are things that we probably can't even imagine now because we haven't had an opening night. And once we've had an opening night, we'll be able to say, gosh, let's really look at what happened. And I'm sure there'll be, all sorts of learnings and opportunities to move forward. Continuing to deepen the connections between our boards as well, which is, again, a very Chicago thing. Board members embrace more than one organization.
Anthony, your thoughts on this?
I think, like all the best relationships, the relationship between Lyric and the Joffrey is intended to be long-term. And for it to be long-term, it has to be evolving, developing, changing constantly. We have to be not just open, but positively eager to learn lessons as we go along. And there will be a huge number of lessons that we will learn, particularly when we go back into the opera house and start rehearsing and performing. I think we have the perfect starting point, I must say. I think the warmth and trust that already exists between our two organizations really offers us a wonderful opportunity to break new ground, frankly, to explore how a partnership that is so desired and willed by both sides can grow and flourish and develop. Just as the world is full of legendary opera houses with opera and ballet companies, so it must be said the world is full of some of those legendary opera houses having companies that are not always in harmony with each other. Let's try and demonstrate how a great opera house can have a great ballet company and a great opera company working in harmony together to achieve a true win-win partnership for both organizations and for the city.
I know that, as Greg well knows, the Joffrey was the subject of a Stanford Business School case some years ago. I'm wondering if your colleagues, perhaps at Northwestern Business School or at Booth in Chicago, are circling around thinking that maybe there's an interesting business school case here. Is that a possibility in a couple of years, do you think?
Sounds like a great idea.
Very good.
Thank you for planting the seed.
Yeah.
Well, as somebody mentioned, the author of that business school case is on the call. So, Kara, if you're listening, be in touch. They're waiting to hear from you. We did have a question in the chat box asking about the donor base. You've mentioned, Anthony, quite eloquently talking about the audience development possibilities of shared audiences. And Greg, you mentioned briefly the notion perhaps that there might be some shared productions. Have you thought about the implications for your donor base? Has anybody pushed back and said, gee whiz, I'm an opera guy, I'm not a ballet person? I mean, any pushback from the donors, or are people supportive?
The opposite, really, Michael. I mean, we explored it in the context of Orfei, because on both our boards, there are opera enthusiasts and ballet enthusiasts. And as we've said earlier, I think boards really are excited by collaborative partnerships between the organizations that they are part of and that they support and that they lead. So yes, I think it's very fertile territory that I'm sure we'll be exploring.
Yeah. And Greg, do you feel the same?
Yeah, sure. Yes, completely. And I would say already we have engaged new donors because of the partnership with the Lyric. I will say that the Lyric Opera, has a deep, deep, deep history of being one of the most amazing in Chicago cultural organizations, raising funds, a board, a deep, deep history of philanthropic support. And there's much that we can learn from the Lyric, and I think much that we can teach them. But there's already been crossover support, and I certainly expect that it will only continue, both from the individual side, but from the corporate side and the foundation side, and really getting behind the notion of collaboration and partnership. So I don't ever see, I don't ever see things as competitive in Chicago. I celebrate when the Lyric gets a major anonymous grant to reseat the entire theater. It's like, yes, this is a win for them. It's a win for Chicago. It's a win for us now because the Joffrey gets to perform there. But if we weren't performing there, it would still be a win for me personally because my sightlines would be better. And I think that crosses performing arts, the visual arts in the entire city. The CSO, the Goodman, Steppenwolf, the MCA, the Art Institute, we really, really worked together.
And there are our beautiful new seats.
I say, Anthony, you're very proud to show off your new venue.
I am. We from top to bottom, we have brand new seats. It was funded generously by an anonymous foundation, a restricted gift for this purpose. So we didn't divert funds from elsewhere. We realigned all the rows on the main floor, so you'll no longer be looking directly into the head of the person sitting in front of you. We widened the aisles. It's really transformed the space. All it now needs are 3,200 people to sit in the seats.
Would any of you care to speculate when that time might come? Are you thinking September? Are you thinking December? Well, obviously, Ballet's thinking December, but
Michael, don't you think one of the lessons we've all had to learn over the last year is that there is no dishonor in the answer, I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough.
This vacuum of uncertainty, which has been such a curse and which continues. Honestly, we're planning to reopen our season in September. The Joffrey is also planning to open its new season on time and as planned. It's only February. Let's hope that in the 5 or 6 months ahead, the uncertainty will begin to clear, and we'll be able to move ahead with confidence in the way that we plan the future.
So as we wrap up, let me just ask you the last question. I suppose you've talked about a lot of these issues already, but 10 words or so, each of you, advice you would give to others who come knocking on your door in the next couple of years and say, gosh, lessons learned. What advice would you give them? Drew, starting with you, just in a nutshell.
I'm not sure I'd recommend this for the weak of heart, but I think just be honest from day one. Just be completely honest, because there's no shame in talking about something and not being able to do it. There's a lot of shame in talking about something and realizing that you misled somebody. So even more important than a marriage, because this affects the lives of thousands and thousands of people, be honest.
Okay, Greg?
We have been, and we have been.
Greg,
I would say be honestly open to new ideas. And I think all of us over the past 11 months, have learned to deal with risk without any sort of a roadmap or a game plan. So take some of those learnings and translate them into ways that can really support the artists that we are here to serve and advance. So yeah, I think it's honest, open, risk-taking.
Ashley?
It seems to work.
Great, Andrew.
I would say that, you know, like Daniel Burnham, make no small plans. I think that with the you know, partnership between the Lyric and the Joffrey, I think that our first outing, which was the Orfei, it galvanized the city and our audiences across the board. And so I think that that's a really beautiful starting point. And I think that from here on forward, if we can be creative and we can present great art at every level in the city of Chicago. But it comes down to what Drew and Greg and everyone has said, is the trust, open communication, and really be honest with what your ideas are. And I think that, you know, you can have expectations, but unless you have the conversation, you'll never know whether those expectations are real or not.
Fantastic. And Anthony, finally, take us home.
I agree with everything my colleagues have said. I suppose the one thing I would add is that I don't think there has ever been a better, more appropriate moment for exploring these partnerships than now. COVID has turned our world upside down to an extent that none of us ever contemplated. We are all hoping and desperately looking forward to the recovery period and to the post-COVID world that we will all be exploring eagerly. I think we already know that that post-COVID world is going to be fundamentally different from the pre-COVID world. What better opportunity could there be than this new world in which to explore new relationships, new partnerships, and dream big?
Wonderful. Well, we are just about out of time. I'm sure I speak for everyone who is on the call. I, for one, look forward to the time when I can fly to Chicago and sit in those new comfortable seats and experience both the Joffrey and the Lyric, as I love both organizations. Thanks so much to all of our guests for joining us, and to all of you for sharing your insights with us today. Just a quick note for those of you who are listening, that by joining us today, you will receive a summary of today's discussion, as well as a notification of future webinars in our ABA Live series. After we conclude today's conversation, please visit our website, advisoryboardarts.com. There on our homepage, you'll see a link to all of our content, as well as the recordings of this and previous webinars. You'll see a number of resources that will help you as you think about digital content, as you think about relationships, issues related to DE&I, and audience development, and so many other areas that our research team has been focused on over the last year and a half. We love your feedback, so please take a moment to fill out the poll on your screen. Thanks in advance for sharing your time with us and for sharing your thoughts. We'll hold the poll open for a couple minutes more, but on behalf of all of us at the Advisory Board for the Arts, let me thank Ashley, Anthony, Greg, and Drew. As always, I'm grateful to my partner and colleague Karen for making everything work so smoothly. Be well, stay safe, stay sane, remain hopeful, and perhaps in a year from now, we'll all gather in Chicago for a wonderful performance. So thanks all of you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.